Here.
Mr. Klontz, Mr. Reese,
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here. And do you want to do an economic roll call, please?
Mr. Hall, Mr. Bell, Mr. Huddick,
Here.
Mr. Heber,
Here.
Ms. Hatch, Mr. Worrell.
Here.
Okay. So the first thing we have on here is the Economic Development Authority bylaws discussion.
All right, so let's get started. Just for transparency, the Economic Development Board is here. They do not have a quorum, so they are here in attendance to this council meeting, or we would absolutely, they would have to convene a meeting also. But due to not having a quorum, this is a advertised meeting, so we feel like when it comes to FOIA, we have met those obligations legally. So that being said, I want to go back just a little bit in history, and y'all are very much more aware of this than I am, but the EDA was created a number of years ago. I'm not sure what those successes were, or if the EDA doesn't have a failure along with the local government, they're probably not a really active EDA. The pure existence of an EDA brings challenges. It also shows a very proactive locality when you utilize an EDA. So the EDA here was created about 6 months ago. The reason I remember that was because my predecessor and I were actually working together the last month, and there was a project on Main Street that demanded the cooperation with the locality and the EDA to make it a reality. And today that is absolutely a success story, and still moving forward. So EDAs are legislatively supported entity that about every locality has. Towns are maybe an exception to that. They're not utilized as much with the 190 towns in the Commonwealth. A lot of them do have them, but they are, especially at the county level, utilized for great success. So an EDA or an IEDA or an IDA, depends on which route the attorney leads that board to go in at the time of creation, is a extremely powerful board. Their abilities to operate or north of the abilities of the governing body. So the governing body, for example, if they have a piece of property and they're wanting to transfer ownership of that property, and I'm just giving you some examples, the governing body's got to go through a procurement process. So I've got to run it in the paper for X number of days, public hearings, and I've got to accept offers from anybody, anywhere, at least evaluate them. So the complexity of that, even though we as a locality may know what's in the best interest of the locality in which we represent, the governing body has to go around all kinds of loops in order to make things happen. The EDA can look at an individual, do due diligence, and say, okay, you have a project, or we're going to sell this property to you. When it comes to purchasing property, both the EDA and the town council has the power to do that at any time. You don't have to go through a procurement process to purchase land, to purchase property. You're doing due diligence for the best interest of the locality. However, selling that property is different. I could go on and give you 26 years worth of local government experience with EDAs. I can also give you success stories and give you some awful horror stories. Once an EDA is created, they're there, and they're there for their term. Just like an elected official, unless they're impeached, they're there for their term. So EDAs, why do they exist? Again, I hit on it just a little bit earlier. There's projects that we know as leaders in the community that are in the best interest of Pulaski. They may not be in the best interest of Pulaski County. They may not be in the best interest of the Commonwealth, but the way we view it, it's in the best interest here. And we feel like that it matches, and we want it to match the best interest of the Commonwealth and the other states. So they have that ability to make things happen that the governing body can't make happen. So an EDA doesn't have a revenue stream. At this point, our EDA doesn't have a revenue stream. We are going to get there, but we were just recently created. So it's not like anybody's lost any history or lost any grounds, or we're going backwards by any means. We're getting off the ground. We're asking questions. Each one of you that's brought up questions is an important part of making a successful EDA. And hopefully the direction that we want to go in is the same direction for both the town council and the EDA. I can assure you the EDA wanting to go this way and the town council wanting to go that way, you'll make YouTube. And you'll also make the front page of every paper in the area. William will have a kick with that. So he'll absolutely have a field day with that. And I've seen those governing bodies that did that, and it's not fun, especially trying to manage it from where I'm at. But huge opportunities for Pulaski. And there's a number of projects that are on the table that the town council and myself have talked about. So it hadn't been but a couple of months back, maybe back in June, July, but there was a letter sent out by our attorney, and it defined the difference in the housing authority and the EDA. And they both have similar powers. Just one of them works within a housing realm, the other one's a little more commercial. So I wanted Scott to get y'all together tonight. I know some of you had questions about your jobs, and I don't know whether you can really define that outside of the Virginia Code, which you can read at any time. And it can get political, and I would encourage each of you not to be afraid of those questions. Ask those questions, and let's find a way that we can mutually all work on the same team. As director for the EDA, as council's liaison, or CEO, or town manager, it can get complicated working to two different teams. So, Scott, with that being said, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and any explanation you can give on their power, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much to add, but I think Tom did a great job. My experience in local government has been the EDA really is trying to help this existing business grow, or have a business that's interested in coming into the town or the locality, land here and offer incentives. And the way the EDA does that is if it owns land or it can buy land that the company or investor wants, then the EDA makes that happen and gets grants or performance agreements. Because we're spending money, the EDA generally would come to the locality and say, we have a potential project, or the locality comes to the EDA and says, we have a potential project. This is sort of how we need to kind of hook these guys or land them here. Part of that takes money, and then council's gonna be making its own decisions as to how much investment to make. And the EDA staff or the EDA themselves are looking at return on investment. If we spend X million dollars, how long does it take us to recover that in taxes and overflow from the creation of jobs from tax income or whatever income would come in? And then the locality has to make that decision. The council, who has the purse here, as to how much money to provide to the project. And then the EDA funnels that money to the company or investor to try to get them to land here, along with grants from anybody else we can find them. You know, the state of Virginia Tobacco Commission or whoever might be offering money. That's how I see the operation of EDA. But I'm happy to talk about any questions, if you have questions about how you should operate or what should happen.
Thanks, Scott. One thing to keep in mind is there's an elected body, which is the town council. And their objectives, their direction, I absolutely work for the majority of that board. So if the majority of that board says, Todd, go down this road, that's what I'm gonna do. So as an EDA director, I'll take that information or the route that they wanna go in, and I will unpuzzle that and find the best route to get from A to Z, which is what they hire our manager for. And usually that consists of an aggressive EDA. So the council's direction is it. That's the elected body. So you can see that at the state level with your state delegates, your senators. You can absolutely see it at the congressional level. So whatever board council is I'm gonna use the word reigning at that time, that's what's gonna happen. And the EDA works with them to make those exciting dreams a reality. And now I'm gonna shoot straight. If you don't like what council's doing, what a majority of that board is doing as an EDA member, there's no recourse to that, other than you just don't like it. But they do set direction in operation. So EDAs that I've worked in the past have came up with ways to incentivize businesses. I was in a negotiation a couple of months ago, and I took it to council where we offered a business some incentives. And the reason it went that route, because they are the governing body, they've got to come up with those funds. If everything goes right, I will eventually come to the EDA and say, you have to implement these goals, these objectives for this business to come in town that we are catering to right now. And there are a couple of different projects that we're working on that absolutely, if they materialize, will come before the EDA. So I don't know if that helped or not, but I'll help answer any questions as Scott said. If I don't have the answers, I'll find them for you. But the EDA council was really anxious to work with y'all, find out what direction, if any, that you have right now that you want to go in. So I'll leave it up to the EDA and council. Any questions you've got?
Can I ask you a quick question about the bylaws?
Yes.
You said that that both the council and the EDA can purchase property, but
Yes.
I'm looking at just the Article 1, and it says they can accept contributions, grants, or other financial assistance. I think that's fairly
Yeah.
clear. Before any debt or financial obligation is authorized, a recommendation must be made to the council.
Yes.
So, normally, when you purchase, say, a piece of property, you enter into a contract where you are obligated to spend money.
Yes.
So, assuming in this instance that the EDA actually has the funds available from proceeds from other projects or whatever, can they do that without coming to council?
If they have the funds, if the council has obligated those funds to the EDA without restrictions, I'd have to say yes. It's
All right.
not very healthy. But I'd have to say
You
yes.
may not have funds next year.
Yeah, you may not have them.
Right. Well, but I'm asking less from a should they or would they, but
Right.
rather from just a purely practical standpoint.
If
'Cause-
they're unrestricted funds and they're not tied to anything else,
Yeah.
then EDA controls where that money goes.
Okay.
It's their budget.
so
Well, that's true, except there in the proposed, what brought this meeting about, I'm serving as the interim or the temporary chair of the EDA. And, I'm sorry that all our members aren't here. I'll speak for, they came to the point of adopting the bylaws, and there was a section in the bylaws that brought up some heartburn, and it relates to Mr. Reese's question there. In Article 10, it basically states the authority will manage the accounts and the authorized disbursements of funds up to $1,500.
Right.
And anything beyond that requires council's consideration, written approval.
Yeah.
What I'd like to offer, I've worked for the county for many years and I've seen the close relationship between the EDA and the governing board. And what I think would be helpful if that section could be stricken, because it's just 2 sentences there that basically binds the EDA to anything to only spend $1,500 without council's approval, and substitute for that an annual meeting with the council so that we can get the thinking of the council as to what's going on. You may or may not want to be approving every $1,500 that the EDA spends for political reasons. I mean, EDA's got to look at things in the long term, where council may look at things more on a short-term basis. So sometimes you get into a project that may or may not be popular at the time, and if it's having to come back to council every time you spend $1,500, then it's going to cause some problems both for the EDA and for council, or could cause some problems. As a replacement for that, at the same time, you don't want an EDA going off in left field while the council's trying to keep things in a certain direction. And I think having it in the bylaws, a specific requirement that there be this meeting like we're having tonight, where council can share what you'd like to see happen economically for the town, that would give the EDA direction to pursue. And we all understand that there's no one here to say that they're trying to usurp any authority of the council or go in a different direction of the council. And I think that would be a good replacement for that $1,500 limit. The EDAs have gone, there are some nightmares out there with EDAs that have gone crazy. Warren County is the most recent example, by managing their own funds. So I think it's best if the town treasurer handles the EDA money, so you always know what's going on there. You've got an audit trail. It's not like the EDA is going to do something that council doesn't know about or is not privy to. So if we could ask for that substitution in the bylaws, I think that would go a long way to address some of the EDA members' concerns.
I'll give you the political response. We'll take that under consideration.
Can I-
I'm representing both boards.
Can I ask a question though?
Yeah.
So I understand. So there's 2 ways that you could see that limitation being restricted. One is that it doesn't give the EDA flexibility to sort of like, well, we have this opportunity, we'd like to pursue it, we don't want to have to wait, X number of weeks till the next we get on town council agenda, and we want to be able to sort of strike things quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is just like, we don't want to have to ask for every time we write a check. Like, it's more like it just feels, constricting, and it doesn't help. It doesn't make it, if you're interacting with a counterparty, they're like, well, we don't care about you. We got to talk to the council anyway, so why are we about, so it just sort of, so I guess my question is because I can see there being we want to make sure that the money's being spent in the way that it's going to be spent. So I'm thinking does it make sense if you all adopted a budget
Mm-hmm.
where you have and council then approves that budget for the year, whereas so we know by adopting the budget we can sort of identify instances where we want to say you guys run with this. Here's $10, $50, $100,000 to do this project. we leave it up to your discretion to do it, or is it more like you just? Does that question make sense?
And there's a little bit of history here, which I'm not familiar with, I just heard about it
Okay.
at the last meeting, where at some point the EDA and the council got crossways, or at least tripped each other up. And so that's remembered by some of the EDA members, and that they're not looking to get tripped up, to be sidetracked by council. Not that that's gonna happen. I mean, my 30 years for the county, we never had the board of supervisors and the EDA get crossways. I mean, it took a lot of coordination sometimes, and it took a lot of negotiation at times, but never. And I guess that's really what ended up the EDA no longer being kind of going defunct previously. But I think just having some flexibility. Let's say the EDA is negotiating with somebody,
Right.
and the council has said, or we have some money in an account, which we appreciate the council's confidence in having designated some of the funds that are currently loaned back to be able to come back to the EDA for reuse. I think by meeting once a year and sitting down and laying out priorities and looking at the budget, that gives a coordination there. But if they're negotiating with somebody and the price jumps by $1,500, which if you're buying a piece of property is, I don't mean to belittle that, but that's not a lot of money. Then you gotta go back and get approval by council. It's gonna slow. EDA is authorized by state code to act like an individual would in our dealings. Unlike what Mr. Days explained, town council can't do that. If we wanna sell something as private individuals, Jamie, you wanna sell a motorcycle, and I wanna buy it, but if you're town council, you can't just sell that motorcycle, you gotta go through all kinds of bid process. So you're kind of having that dollar amount in there, you're kind of curtailing the entity you're creating.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
So
You're talking about I think if I understood you, you're talking about a discretionary account that in an amount that's been approved by council.
Right. I mean, that's more my thought was is that what's the goal? That's what I was trying to understand. Is that was it more that like you're saying we want to be able to negotiate without having to, come back to council, or is it that we just want to be able to have a budget? And I think certainly, it would be a good idea to have at least a yearly meeting or communication of some kind to interact and make sure that your vision and our vision sort of line up. So I was just trying to understand that.
Another example, I'm just thinking out loud while I'm listening. Let me give you an example. Shannon Ainsley just got brought on board, and I understand her job is going to be to work with existing businesses and try to keep people moving and alive. If Shannon wanted to turn around and help somebody who was going to move into a place or stay in town or whatever, and they needed a couple bucks, let's say they need $2,500. The easiest way for them to do it, her to do it, would be to come to us, the EDA, or the Economic Development Authority. If we had the ability to decide whether or not to give them $2,000, $2,500, $5,000, whatever it is, it would be a lot quicker. If we needed approval over $1,500, they'd have to come up with the idea, they'd have to come to us, it would take a month to get with you, it could take 2 or 3 months to get that small decision. And it might be a faster way to do it.
Okay.
So we don't want, I've heard some of the stories, you don't want anybody getting out of control.
Okay.
Well, let me say, just to maybe back up a
But then have a unrestricted, and then if it's something up above that, then.
let's take a couple steps back from that conversation. The whole thing started because we were using the housing authority successfully for as many years as I can remember, which is not that many years. But when Jeff and Pete, probably remember a whole lot more years, you know, back, you know, the housing.
I believe he's
the
trying to
house-
tell you something,
Thank
Jeff.
you. The housing authority has been this organization, the housing authority was used as essentially the IDA or EDA for the town for as long as I know. And, you know, previous to, and obviously I don't remember the moment where there was some type of, you know, discourse between a created IDA and town council, but in the 6 years that I've been around, the housing authority has functioned perfectly with everything every project that's came on board that needed the ability to handle projects that, you know, with the authority that a council couldn't.
I would just say, for clarification purposes, the housing authority, to my understanding, has always operated within the bounds of the law that the
Right.
housing authority is given.
Right.
They're not acting independently as an EDA.
Right.
Is my understanding.
But so we had projects basically that were commercial in orientation, and so those projects, you know, didn't fit appropriately underneath the housing authority, and so that was, you know, basically the initial purpose, as Todd was talking about, is we needed, you know, to shift, you know, to an IDA or an EDA to make sure that, you know, these commercial projects were underneath an organization that was intended for commercial projects, right? That's the whole purpose that generated the creation and recreation. I guess it was always there, but, you know, was, you know, needed to be redone and redefined and put back into action, was to make sure that we, you know, had the projects that were, you know, needed to be under an IDA instead of a housing authority were underneath the right umbrella. That was the purpose, right? I don't know that initially that the purpose was to change any type of budgetary or financial means of the town, right? I don't know that was the initial discussion. It doesn't mean that couldn't be the discussion of the future, and obviously the purpose of this conversation here. But I just think it's fair to say that that's where it all, you know, originated from, right? It wasn't, you know, intended to be, and under the housing authority, which is, you know, is purely for housing projects, at any point in time when there was you know, obviously, you know, the manager of the town is the one who is, or has been always at the center of any projects, of digging into what we're doing, what's possible, what's happening, and then he's bringing that information to council, and bringing it to a housing authority, and it says, hey, we've got this opportunity out there. Housing authority got this information, came in, it's discussed, whatever it is on this particular project, and then it comes to council and says, hey, this, you know, the housing authority met, you know, this is an opportunity out there. Everybody's okay with it. It's going to cost, you know, it's going to cost $10,000, you know, to move forward, with y'all's approval. And then that, you know, if it gets approval of council, then that $10,000 gets, you know, assigned to the housing authority for that specific purpose.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been, the housing authority has never had, you know, really a pot of money that was really at their discretion so much to just move forward with and do with, you know, as without it being approved, you know, through council. Like, hey, we're going to do this, you know, or you got.
We did. When I was on the housing authority, we did have some money from this company.
So there are currently 2 loans paying money into the EDA every month.
Right.
So
And
on
so-
those
and so
current
that's-
set of bylaws, we wouldn't be able to spend that money over $1,500 without coming here in a month or 2 to even get that approved. So, I mean, I think that we need to work together to figure out how we can be effective.
What's y'all's number?
Sorry?
Yeah.
What's
Why
the
don't-
number y'all would be comfortable
Wait,
with?
why don't we do this? Why can't we make, if they have something more, then they ask Todd and we give him the power to do it. He's.
I take for granted sometimes the operation and the complexities and even the laminar flow of the EDA and town councils. I guess I take it for granted. The EDA, if there is issues in local government with funding, the town council's gonna take that hit. May not have a town manager at the end of the day, but the town council will eventually take that hit politically. trust me, if there's an opportunity that the EDA's got, you don't have to wait for council's meeting. You just need to communicate with me. So another route, if this will help, the $1,500, and Huddock, you mentioned a great point. The monies are right now being put into an EDA account, but it still takes the governing body's authority to make it happen. But let me give you an example of that. Let's say an individual on the EDA, regardless of who it is, saw an opportunity, and for whatever reason that opportunity was politically motivated. And trust me, it will happen. All right. Then the governing body, with different political views, looks at it and says, why did we just give X number of dollars to this entity when they're doing this, that, or the other? So you create a problem there to where if you utilize the council manager form of government for the intent in which it was written, there's only 2 or 3 localities left in the Commonwealth that have a strong mayor form of government, but there's a reason for it. So that communication with the town manager, who is apolitical, I don't ask anybody what their party affiliation is. I work for a majority of that council, and I take my direction in that route. So even with the $1,500, we can create, and you will be involved in a work session. This upcoming December is when they'll start, but it's no problem to say, okay, here's $10,000. But I don't know whether you want the responsibility of having to justify that to the town council of why and how it got out the door without approval. So if you'll rely on your town manager and that liaison between council and the EDA, which 90% of your meetings, that's where it'll be at. And the once a year meeting's great, as Peter, and Peter's got a wealth of experience, the once a year meeting, but I'll assure you that those quick responses, like Shannon, you're right. If Shannon wants $2,500, all she got to do is walk down the hall. That's all she's got to do is come down the hall. So that's a different affiliation with economic developer. It's a different category right now in which she's in. So her job duty is outside of the EDA board. But
And that's
Let me just clarify one thing. In asking for this adjustment, it's asking for flexibility, not independence. You know, there's no question that the council's in charge and that the EDA works to further the goals of council. So it's not a we want to be independent kind of thing. It's more of, do you really want to bind yourself up to have a vote of council for every $1,500 that the EDA spends? Because I can tell you, if it's a major economic development project, it's not going to be without some controversy.
yeah.
You know, when the county, I can give you a bunch of examples of situations that they were somewhat controversial at the time. The most strongest is probably the Heron's Landing development. There was some controversy during that project, and if every expenditure had to have come before the Board of Supervisors for them to have approved, it would have put them in a pretty awkward place at times. Not that they didn't know what we were doing or weren't on board with doing, but there's a little difference between that and having a group of people preaching at you about why this is a problem, and then you're knowing you're gonna have to vote a certain way for it to move forward. So, like I say, there's a reason why the EDA are not elected, and we're not, someone's gotta look, and the same with the planning commission, someone's gotta look at the long-term situation, while quite frankly, the council takes the heat sometimes for what's the issue of the day kind of thing. So again, please don't misunderstand the $1,500 as an independence thing. It's more a flexibility issue, not independence.
So in the budget, when we go into the annual budget, and I'm not so sure I still understand your question about the 1,500. So do you want the $1,500 or do you want it more?
I think what they're asking for is to
Starting.
remove the number itself.
Yeah.
And just basically have, if we've got a budget, and the council has approved the budget,
Yes.
then because as it's written, it says disbursement, so that could be any check being written. The way I read it.
So for
Okay.
example, with the housing authority, that they have the roof fund, or whatever, there was, money,
Yeah.
money that was available for the roof fund. Let's say the housing authority had $10,000 for a roof fund. If the housing authority decided to approve $1,500 or $3,000 towards, a roof fund with money that was designated for a roof, they wouldn't
need approval of
would not
council.
need approval.
Yeah.
But so in this instance, and that's just to clarify, that line
Yeah.
is, let's say there's a big economic development project, right? And the council approves, that we're going to move forward with this, and we say it's going to take $100,000 to do it, and so we assign $100,000 to this project, for what we are expecting it to cost at that phase or whatever. Then if they have, obviously the EDA is the one that's actually handling that project and dispersing the funds and doing all that kind of stuff with it. If we've assigned $100,000 towards that project to the EDA, if they need to cut a check for $3,000, they don't have to come to us, right?
No, because it's already an approved project. So maybe that's.
Well, maybe we just need to clear up.
Yeah, maybe, I think maybe it's just some clarity.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is I think if that's y'all's concern is there's $100,000 project that's been approved, and
Oh,
the
Lord,
EDA's
no.
handling that project, that you would have to come every time you needed to spend the money that's already been approved.
Well, I think there's also the concern of like having a budget, and if they need to move
Or
money
unassigned-
around or something
or
like that.
unassigned money if you just,
Yeah.
I
if
don't
they
think
had
that there
a
is
budget
no
on
Yes.
this much.
Yeah,
Well,
so,
no, there's gonna be unassigned money. There's 2 loans that are getting paid back.
By the end of the week, there'll be about 25,000 in there.
Yeah.
So we couldn't even spend 15,
But
16.
here's my question, I guess, for you guys or you guys is the intentions for for the EDA to have a pot of unassigned money that is functioning on its own independently.
My take
that's
on
the way
this,
it's
the
being said.
EDA and IDA, they're actually formed to take the burden off of us up here. They should be their own governing body. When whoever elects appoints these people here, and I can assure you, we're surrounded with, I put all my eggs in these guys' baskets, I'm not worried about that part of it. The government doesn't spend money very wisely, and I don't mean that to be a negative way, because we have so many hooks and so many things. EDA and IDA has one hook and one thing here. In development, they do their background, they do their search. They know how that money is to be spent more than what we do, because we got 50 other things going on.
Oh.
I don't know if I said it right, but the way these guys do, that's why you put them in there.
So we are 15, I got somebody waiting in the hall.
Yeah.
But, so let's do this right here. We'll tweak that language. But let me say, I will build a budget with council that'll have EDA and funds in there. And I'll even push for council's, support to allow a majority of the EDA on a vote to spend that money as desired and encourage code following. And next year, if they don't like it, they can change it. But I'm just saying, and you may have, by the way, $1,500, but in less than 2 hours, you may have $2 million. So, and that's just the way it works. I've got to make something happen. I've got this project. I lobby council. I talk with them, and they move on it, Todd. If you don't, we're gonna hire somebody else who will. And I get hold of the EDA, and we transfer money. It's just the way it works. So that $1,500, again, it's the governing body's money. it's the governing body's responsibility if it gets spent in a fashion that's inappropriate or appropriate, and I'm the one that's carrying that bullseye on behalf of the county council.
So your solution then would be to just, if I understood you correctly, is to just, council would adopt or
Sure,
allow
yeah.
a sum of money
Yeah.
that the EDA could use.
Yeah, I can absolutely support, I can absolutely have no problem. I don't like the idea, and I'm doing it, I represent both boards. I want the governing body to have the power to go in the direction that they wanna go in. That's where my allegiance is at. And I don't want the EDA to go off in a different direction and council ask me, what have you done? So, and I don't think the EDA wants that responsibility either. So, I think we can fix it. I think it's just some language.
To take a practical example, we have a company that's interested in locating here. One thing I believe very strongly in is somebody, not necessarily me, but somebody from the locality needs to go to wherever that company has another existing operation, so they can talk to the residents, they can smell the smell, they can see
Sure.
what's going on, get an understanding of what that business is like. Well, that may cost more than $1,500. And you
Absolutely.
don't necessarily want council having to approve
No.
for someone to take a road trip to
Yeah.
go check out.
And you won't have to. The way we'll set it up will
If
alleviate
we,
that.
if
So.
we can fix that, I think.
Absolutely, we will.
Like in that,
We can
that
do that.
example, in my opinion, that person going would be hot.
And it could
would
be-
and
it could-
the EDA would be in the town's budget
Yeah.
already,
Well, it makes sense though that if we're gonna do this right, EDA should be funding that.
Absolutely.
Because that's why we have money there, so that we don't have to change the appropriations.
Only other question, Pete, you made the comment that, you know, annual meeting, and this may be getting in the weeds, but it seems to me, you know, in order to create the unity, it sounds like that everybody's, you know, the continuity there, everybody's interested in. Would a more frequent, a quarterly, would that make sense, or is that overkill?
Whatever suits council's fine. I think it should be at least annually. It could be more. It's probably good to set it at least on an annual basis, and then as needed, you have a project, you want it better, everybody better sit down, eyeball each other, make sure we understand what we're doing. So, that's a good point. It maybe need to be more frequent.
I'll be bringing a lot of ideas to the EDA coming up. The comfort level is getting there, but also y'all's comfort level of working within the legislative powers of an EDA needs to also be there. I'm good. Yeah, we're running.
Okay,
like
so
20
I'm
minutes
gonna,
late.
I'm gonna call this meeting adjourned.
Sorry.